Hi, this is Donna. Welcome to DD Paper Crafts. In today's video, we're making this handbag, satchel style bag, gift bag. This is 6 inches across, 4 inches high and 2 inches deep, but it wouldn't be too difficult for you to resize this to what you need. You will need some Velcro dots, magnets, or you will need to consider before you put the project together your closure system. You might be happy just to use some glue dots, but we have a front flap here and I have used Velcro dots for this. So this comes up and over the front handle. The front handle folds back and then we have the front flap which opens, again I've used Velcro dot here, which opens like so, and then you can obviously access the goodies inside. There are obviously elements that you could change up: the shape of the front flap, the shape of the handles, the width of the straps, etc. So you might want to think about before you start how you might want to adapt the look of the bag. It'll use about 2.5 sheets of cardstock, a little bit extra if you decide to double up on the handles as I've done, but I will go through that in the video. So without further ado, let's put the gift bag together. We'll go through all the individual pieces that you'll need first and then work on the pieces one at a time. So for the front and the back of the bag, which is effectively going to be an open box, we're going to start with a piece which is 8.25. So this is the width of A4, or if you've got US letter, use the full width, the 8.5 width. It will just mean that you have 1/4 inch glue tab on the A4 rather than 1/2 inch as you will on the US letter. And this will be times 6 inches. So 8.25 or 8.5 times 6 inches, and you'll need 2 pieces. Along the longest side, score at 6 and 8, and then rotate to the short side and score at 4. So this is going to give us our 4-inch height and our 2-inch depth of our bag, and it's 6 inches wide. Now, as you saw at the beginning, this is basically a broken down box, so you can make this bag any size you need to suit what you need and then just resize the additional components. So you'll have 2 pieces like so. Then you'll have 1 piece which is 6 inches square, and this is going to be for the lid and the flap. And we're going to keep this in our scoreboard and put some markings in. And you want to work on the reverse of your cardstock. So if you line your ruler up with the 1-inch track down the left hand side, you want to make a pencil mark between 1 inch and 1/8 of an inch, and then 4 7/8 of an inch and 5 inches. Then move your ruler down to 4 inches and do the same. So a pencil mark between 1 and 1/8 of an inch, and a pencil mark between 4 7/8 and 5 inches, like so. And then you're going to join those pencil lines up. So you will join up the pencil mark down to the pencil mark, and the pencil mark down to the pencil mark. Do the same on this side. So you're joining the 4 7/8 at the top up with the 4 7/8 at the bottom, and the 5 inch at the top with the 5 inch pencil mark at the bottom. And then you're going to line your ruler up at 4 inches and just join up all the way across. So you will end up with this look on your piece. We're now going to work on the handles, and depending on the cardstock that you're using, you might find that you want a handle that's made up of 2 pieces added together, or if you're using a heavier weight, you might be okay with 1 layer of cardstock. So you'll need 2 pieces, which are 3 3/4 times 7 3/4. Take your ruler, and you're going to line your ruler up with the 3/4 inch mark down the left hand side. Make sure your ruler is running horizontally, and you're going to draw a line across between 3/4 and 3 inches. Move your ruler down to 2 3/4, and again you're going to run a pencil line across between 3/4 of an inch and 3 inches. Move your ruler down to, and again make a pencil line between 3/4 of an inch and 3 inches, and then move your ruler down to the bottom edge of the cardstock and just make a pencil mark at 3/4 of an inch and 3 inches. And then you want to join those lines up. So you will have one line across here and one line across here, and you're going to join those up with vertical lines. And then you're going to do the same in the bottom section. So you're going to draw a vertical line between the ends of the line that you've drawn in down to the bottom of the cardstock to the pencil mark that we've just made. So you will either do that 2 times or 4 times, depending on the weight of the cardstock that you're using. This cardstock I'm using is around 250, and I have chosen to join 2 pieces together. So now we've got all our pieces cut out, we're going to work on them each individually, and we're going to start with the 2 pieces which will be for the front or the back. So the first thing we want to do is fold and burnish along all of the score lines. If you're using a 1/4 inch tab, just take care as you fold it over that you stay on the score line and don't veer off at all. So bring in your scissors. If you have the piece in this orientation, so your tab is over on the right hand side, we're going to cut up the vertical score line up to the horizontal like so. So this is creating our base tabs. Move along to the next score line and cut up like so. Try to remove the score line as you do, because it will just give you a neater look. Rotate round, and I'm going to remove this rectangle and cut diagonally into this glue tab at the same time, like so. So we've removed this section here, and then I can just shape the other end. So you want to do that for both pieces. And then what we're going to do with this particular project, because we are going to be layering bits on top of bits, so the next thing you want to do is add on your pattern paper to your outside. So my pattern paper, I have one piece here which is 5 3/4 times 3 3/4, and one piece here which is 1 3/4 times 3 3/4. So you want to stick your pattern paper onto the outside of your front and back sections. The next thing is we're going to join the piece together. So I'm going to add glue onto this glue tab here and join this section into place. So that's going to sit on there like so. I'm going to flip the piece over, fold over this narrow end and add glue to this glue tab. Then we're going to fold over this end and join up the piece. Flip the piece up. We're now going to work on the base. Just fold in your 2 small sections and just see whether you need to shape those at all. Those look okay. I'm going to use my collal for this because it will add some strength to the cardstock. And then I'm just going to go in and burnish down the tabs. That is the basis for the bag. So as I said earlier, you can see how easy it would be to change up the size of this. So the next piece we're going to work on is the front flap. And the first thing you want to do is add onto the front of the piece your pattern paper. So I have rounded off the corners just because that's my preferred look, and then I have a piece of pattern paper which is 5 3/4 inches square, and I've also rounded off the corners of those, and I've stuck that to the front of this particular panel. So once that's dry, we're going to flip that over. And you now want to take a craft knife and ruler. You could use your trimmer if you're adept at using your trimmer in that way, but my preference is to use a craft knife and ruler. And we're basically going to cut along all of the pencil lines. So make sure that you get your piece lined up. And remember that you're cutting through your cardstock and your pattern paper, so you probably will need to put a fair amount of pressure, particularly with the pattern paper I've used. It's got a like flop effect on it, so I probably am going to have to work quite hard to get through that. So I'm just going to work my way around. Now all these cut lines are going to be visible, so you want to make sure that you do take your time to cut these as straight as possible. So that's our flap and our closure, and what I am going to do is I am going to round off the corners of this flap section. So we now want to add this onto the box section. Decide whether your box has got a front or a back. It might not matter which side you stick it on. The first thing we want to do before we stick the piece down is we're just going to add a curve into the sections. So I'm going to start with this and just use my score tool just to add a slight curve into that, because we want this to have a curved look as it comes down over the front of the bag. So what we want to do is we're going to add glue to the bottom 1 inch of this section all the way across, and then that is going to sit on the back of the box like so. So I'm going to use my construction glue. This is effectively the hinge. So I'm going to get the cut lines lined up with the top edge of the box on the inside. Make sure you get your sides lined up. You just want the lid to be nice and level on the back. So let's flip this over. So I'm just going to put some pressure on that with my fingers and burnish that down from the inside like so. So you can see the cut edge is level with the back of the box. So whilst that's drying, we will work on the handles. So for the handles, what we're going to do quite simply is, again, we're going to use our craft knife and ruler, and we're going to cut out this section in here, and we're going to create the 2 legs on the outside of this section. So you will either have 2 or 4 pieces which look like this. So I'm going to join 2 pieces together. So as I said, this is entirely optional depending on what you're going to be putting in the bag. Maybe if you already know and it's something lightweight, then you might not need to worry about extra strength handles, or if you're using a lightweight cardstock. So whilst that's drying, I'll just bring in the one that I've done already. So I've rounded off the corners, and then on one set of the handles only, and it's going to be the set which is going to be on the front of the box. You might want to put a score line in or just fold it over by hand, but we're just going to create a crease across where these front legs are across the front. So as I say, you might want to go in with your score across, or you might be happy just to fold them up, but we're going to just put a score line in across the 2 legs in line with this cut line like so. So we can now put the piece all together. So the first thing we want to do is take the front legs. So these will be the ones that has the crease in them. And we're going to stick those so that the top edge of this cut piece here is level with the top edge of the bag, but we're only going to add glue to the 2 legs. So I'm going to line this up like so. So these 2 edges are aligned, and then I'm going to just fold over where this wraps around the base of the bag, so I can start to get the length of the legs that I need. So you should find that that comes across maybe just under halfway across the bottom of the bag. So we will add glue to the legs, and then, as I say, we want to position them so that these tops are level, but we also want to bring over the front flap and make sure that the handle is sitting equidistant in the gap between these 2 cut lines like so. So this is a nice amount of glue on it, because as I say, this pattern paper does have a textured flop on it. So I'm going to bring the flap in and slot my handle in. Make sure that my top cut edge of my handle is level with the top edge of the bag. Bring this flap down. Make sure that my piece is sitting equidistant between the two. It needs to just come over this way a little bit. I'm quite happy with that. Obviously, if you wanted to measure and mark, you could do that if you wanted to be 100% precise about it. Let's get this all lined up. Make sure it's sitting nice and straight. I'm quite happy with that, and then I'm just going to burnish that all down into place. So I'm going to pull this flap back, push these down, make sure your legs are sitting straight, which you can do, work that out by pulling the lid flap open and just making sure that the legs are running vertically and not off at an angle. So you can see how that looks on the front there. So I'm just going to lift this up and just go in and burnish from the inside, pushing down where I know the legs are, and then I can stand up and also do the same where I know the straps are on the bottom. So we now want to stick on the back handle, but in order to make sure that it does line up, I'm going to add on my fastenings and keep the lid and the closure closed. So as I mentioned at the beginning, you will need either some Velcro dots or some magnets. I have some Velcro dots which I have coloured black with an alcohol marker. So my first two are going to go just inside the front flap like so. And then I have one which is going to go into the closure. So the closure is going to fit in between the gap of where the front handle comes down and the lid. So that's going to fit in there like so. So I'm just going to push that down into place. In fact, I think that I'm probably going to need more. These Velcro dots are quite small, but it will give you the general idea. So this handle is going to come up, and then it comes through this flap, and then this is going to come down. So just position it where you want it, but obviously make sure it's sitting level. So that's the front of the bag. So you know that the two pieces are exactly the same length. So what you could do is measure how much comes over the bottom. So that is 1 inch comes over the bottom. So if I score from the bottom 1 inch, the handles should be the same length coming up the back of the box. So I am going to do that. So I'm going to score at 6 3/4, fold those over. So again, if you want to measure across the distance between the edge and the handle and mark it on the back so you get exactly the same, you obviously can do that. So my straps are 1 1/8 across. So I'm just going to put a pencil mark rather than guessing. 1 1/8. I'd rather take an extra few seconds to measure it and get it right than ruin the whole thing. So with this one, we're going to add glue to the legs, and we're also going to add it to this bar. So that is going to sit on securely across the back like so. Now you could of course change the shape of the handles if you so wanted. You don't need to have them this shape. You might have some semicircular dies that you want to use. You can create the handle look or the shape of the top of the handle. Gone very excessive with the glue there. So this is going to sit on the back. Put my pencil marks like so. That's good. Make sure the straps are running on the bottom. Make sure it's sitting nice and vertically. Just going to go in and burnish that down. So there we have our bag. Just take care when you first open the Velcro if you're using Velcro dots. So I can pull that open and now fully press those down. So there we have our flap. So this will come up and over the handle. The handle will fold down and then you can open the closure and get into the bag like so. So I think I will change this one Velcro dot for 2 Velcro dots either end, but that will then come across, and what I am going to do is just add a little bit more of a curve with my fingers so that can now come and sit nicely over the front. And there we have our closure over the front. Bring the handle up through the flap and bring this flap down. And there we have our gift bag. So there we have our project for today. If you've enjoyed this project, you might like some of the other gift bags which I've made, and I will link the gift bag playlist up in the top corner. If you've enjoyed today's project, please give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to the channel. Until next time, thanks for watching.